President Trump has reportedly narrowed down his search for a Supreme Court pick to 3 individuals: Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and Raymond Kethledge. His pick will likely end up deciding the vote on a number of important issues, including affirmative action. And just this week, the Trump administration struck a blow to the policy, encouraging schools to no longer consider race in their admissions. Now, this is an enormous reversal of the Obama-era policy of promoting diversity on campuses. So what exactly is affirmative action? Well, at its core, it's a series of principles and procedures designed to both rectify and prevent discrimination, particularly in schools and in the workplace. The origins of our current understanding of the concept comes from President Kennedy's 1961 executive order on equal employment opportunity. The contractor will take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and that employees are treated during employment without regard to their race, creed, color, or national origin. That's expanded, by the way, since 1961. But the Obama-era policy that Trump is revoking goes into a lot more detail about the benefits of diversity in education. Quote, ensuring that our nation's students are provided with learning environments comprised of students of diverse backgrounds is not just a lofty ideal. These benefits greatly contribute to the educational, economic, and civic life of this nation, end quote. But here's Attorney General Jeff Sessions commenting on the very same policy. Quote, in the Trump administration, we are restoring the rule of law. That's why we began rescinding guidance documents that were issued improperly or that were simply inconsistent with current law. Now, at least on paper, Sessions appears to disagree with the method in which the Obama administration set these and other guidelines. But of course, the reality of this issue is much more politically fraught. Affirmative action has been controversial among voters since its inception. A 2016 Gallup poll found that 70% of Americans believe colleges should not consider race during the application process, for example. Critics of the program argue that making decisions based on race or gender prevents a truly egalitarian society. Of course, those critics often ignore the ways in which institutionalized prejudice prevents the very same goal. And that's to say nothing of those whose opposition to the program may be rooted in genuine prejudice of their own, or the fact that they feel like their ambitions have been put aside because of affirmative action. Many critics of affirmative action wish to believe that we live in a post-racial society, and therefore these programs are no longer necessary. But the racial wage gap exists and is getting worse. Black men still make 22% less than white men with the same level of education and experience. Black women make 34% less. With me now is Catherine Lehman. She's the head of civil rights for Obama's Education Department and the chair of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Catherine, you are quoted in the Los Angeles Times as saying taking away that guidance undermines the steps toward equality that school communities have long been taking. Tell me a bit more about this.
Thanks so much for having me today, and thanks so much for talking about this issue. The rescinding of guidance is a decision to withdraw information from the American public, from our school communities, about what our civil rights laws are, how to comply with them, and the way that the federal government will enforce them. It's a serious mistake, and it sends a deeply dangerous signal to all of our school communities that this administration does not believe in, is not here to support diversity and inclusion in our school communities.
Okay, 2 things. There have been several rulings by the Supreme Court over the years, going back to the 70s, on this. The latest one was actually after the Obama-era guidance came out in 2016. I think it was the University of Texas, where the court affirms the benefit to the nation of affirmative action. Attorney General Sessions seems to draw a different conclusion.
He sure does, but there's been an unbroken line over more than 4 decades from the United States Supreme Court supporting, clarifying, confirming the ability to use race in college and university admissions and in our K-12 student assignment systems. And that unbroken line comes from the need for the academic freedom interest in achieving diversity in our schools so that we are educating our students and our school communities toward the workforce that our students will grow up to work in and live in, toward the community communities that they will be leading and thriving in. So we want to make sure that our students are able to be full people who are fully educated in diverse communities.
So I'm as a layperson, not a lawyer, not a civil rights expert, explain to me the various goals of affirmative action. On one, it is repairing things that have been wrong in the past. On another, it is ensuring fair treatment for people who are otherwise institutionally discriminated against, including women. And on the third level, the rulings by the Supreme Court indicate that it's actually societally beneficial to prepare students for an environment in which they are going to work. These are different ideological concepts.
They absolutely are, but you're absolutely right also about what three of the, I would say, four buckets are of interests in achieving diversity in schools. The remaining one that you didn't mention is the school's academic interest in making sure that they have the student population that they're interested to educate. And that's a core First Amendment interest that the Supreme Court has long recognized as well. And the reason that all of those interests come into play is that we want to educate the whole person. We want to recognize who each member of a school community is and be sure that we're supporting that student's individual learning as well as the collective learning together. And all of those are critically important to being able to be excellent at math, to be excellent as a thinker and a learner, as well as to be able to take that education and apply it once in the workforce as well.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.